Welcome to our final part covering Attack of the Clones. If you have not seen part 1 or part 2, we suggest you going to that first. And if you have, let's move on and finish this film. When Padme and Anakin arrive at Geonosis, an interesting detail is that Padme originally had an alternate addition to her outfit, a hood. Here are some pictures of this getup that we never saw in the film, but were later represented in the Clone Wars animated series. A figure was even made that also had this hood. Anyways, we get to the scene with the conveyor belt, and there are some things to cover here. First of all, it should be noted that the droid factory scene was late in production during 2001. In the original script, Anakin and Padme simply snuck into Geonosis and ran into Count Dooku. Everything was blue screen, but there were some elements that were miniatures during the droid factory scenes. I will say there are some nice details in the factory because you can see many of the droid parts under construction, such as super battle droid chest plates and destroyer droid heads, to name a few. Now, there are a lot of things that detail-orientated observers can note about the scene, but some of it strains believability, as Padme ducking under compressors is really hard to swallow, especially with that cape of hers. She falls to the line near molten hot lead squares and lands perfectly to not be scarred for life. There is also Anakin's cape flowing perfectly over these hot lead metal plates, never once catching on fire at all. At least Anakin gets hit in the face, but when he is not knocked out. With a machine arm that big and at that speed, it's amazing he has no scar for life and was not knocked out. Worse, when his arm gets pinned, he rolls in and out of cutters with amazing ability and survives. The molten lead vats that Padme fell into is really the best part of this scene, and it gives R2 a heroic moment. It also provides great tension as well. This is underscored by the capture of Anakin, though, when a really bad CGI Jango Fett lands in this area, and it is shocking how bad it is. They spent a ton of money for this crappy-looking Jango rather than just using the suit. It's just another thing you scratch your head at when watching this movie. After their capture, a scene cut from the film was where Amidala and Anakin confronts Dooku. She tries to push a diplomatic route to free Obi-Wan Kenobi, but Dooku states he doesn't recognize the Republic, but he will listen to her if she joins the Separatist movement. Once again, Padme is a strong presence and does not back down. This also includes the next deleted scene, where Padme and Anakin are put in a show trial before Poggle the Lesser for killing some of his citizens, defiling some of their factory, and sneaking on the premises. He calls this espionage, and she calls him out for starting a war and says,
I hope you're prepared for the consequences.
Poggle's response is awesome, and it's probably the only part of the last two deleted scenes that I would want in the film, but it doesn't work without the scenes in their entirety, so once again, them not being in the film makes sense. Now we come to the kiss scene, and if they truly believe they are at death's door, I can believe that she might open up to Anakin even if he is a genocidal maniac earlier. To be honest, I kept expecting to see a scene like this in later installments after Padme changed her mind about dating crazy Anakin.
You know, Wayne, if you're not careful, you're gonna lose me.
I lost you 2 months ago. Are you mental? We broke up. Get the net.
Like always, Obi-Wan has a moment where he can diminish Anakin's efforts, only showing how he mistreats his Padawan every chance he gets.
I retransmitted it just as you had requested, Master. Then we decided to come and rescue you. Good job.
You could say he's having sarcastic banter, but piled up on all the other things he said to Anakin throughout the film, it doesn't come off that way. Nearing the end of the beast fight in the arena, a scene occurs which sparked a fan theory not long ago. When Obi-Wan goes on the reek, Padme places her hand on Obi-Wan's thigh and keeps it there without any resistance from Obi-Wan. Some fans believe that this is fact, that Obi-Wan and Padme had an affair, and this is one of the reasons why Anakin is so insanely jealous of Obi-Wan nearing the end of Revenge of the Sith.
Obi-Wan's been here, hasn't he?
He came by this morning.
What did he want?
He's worried about you.
He cares about us.
Us.
He knows.
I don't want to hear any more about Obi-Wan. You're with him! You brought him here to kill me!
No!
The Revenge of the Sith novel kind of destroys this theory, but if one's canon is only these films, there is room for debate. As for me, I don't really believe this theory, as I think there are a lot of other things that can explain this. The main one being, it could have been a harmless fluke in a take for all we know. There have been a lot of takes in this film with sordid deliveries and errors, and this scene could be no different.
Believe me, I wish that I could just wish away my feelings.
As I have said in other videos, this is one hypothesis you will have to decide, much like the Jar Jar theory.
You'll have to decide. You'll have to decide. You'll have to decide.
So before we get to the Jedi battle, one has to ask how all the Jedi got here. Is there no detection on this planet for incoming ships at all? Also, look at the arena. It is made up of completely alien Geonosians. We know this because we can see them flying everywhere when the fit hits the Shan. So how did a bunch of different looking entities, who did not really disguise themselves, get into position without a ruckus starting? Most of the Jedi don't even have hoods on, so they walked around without subterfuge. I know I'm nitpicking, don't get me wrong, I really enjoy this third act, but there are so many rushed things about this film that it really messes up the narration. Despite all the rushed material, this entire battle is eye candy. I could spend over 10 minutes stopping and starting frames to show you things in the background, but that should be for you to have fun with when you rewatch it, because I assure you that a new thing can be spotted every time you watch this film. There are dual-wielding Jedi in the background, Jedi using the Force on destroyer droids, kicking droids, impaling droids, tripping droids, Jedi running across the battlefield fighting nothing, Jedi fighting nothing with no CGI inserted. It is nuts and loads of fun to find this small stuff. I really can't fault anything in the arena. It's just a great scene from Star Wars. One thing I always thought was cool during this fight is take a look at the charge. Many of the Jedi from the upper floors can be seen jumping down into the arena, thus explaining how they joined their fellows below. I always thought that was a cool detail. So before Dooku stops the droids to offer surrender, we need to cover the Trade Federation starship attack. Originally, many of the Jedi in the arena were not going to be with the rest of the Jedi. They were invading a droid control ship in an attempt to shut off the droids. Here's a soundbite introducing the battle in the droid control ship.
Someone's got to shut down these droids!
Don't worry. We're taken care of.
The scene cuts to Ki-Adi-Mundi and Plo Koon raiding the droid control ship, up its ramp, in the halls, and eventually into the control room. The team would successfully shut down the droids, and this scene would intercut with Amidala lowering her weapon with the Jedi surrounded. The droids would then shut off, and they would take a breather. Anakin would glance at Padme hopefully, but then the droids would reactivate, to which Ki-Adi-Mundi would say,
They're independent of the control system!
This entire story thread was cut, and newly made scenes showed Kai and Plo on a balcony and in the fight. Since they were not originally in the circle of Jedi at the end of the battle, the new cut had them being added to the group along with Aayla Secura to account for the characters in the battle. I think the droid ship scenes would have muddled the battle, and I think it was a good idea they weren't in the movie. They are really without fault, but it is left as is. One scene that I have mixed feelings about is the death of Jango Fett. Originally, his death scene was more gruesome. Originally, Mace not only decapitated Jango Fett, but he sliced him up and cut off his arm as well. I got this re-edited version from a channel called Vanilla that shows what it would have looked like in its completed version. I think his death was impactful enough as is, but I do like the alternate version too. Note which death you would have preferred in the comments below. I would like to know your opinion on this. For those not well versed in Jango's death, when you watch the film again, watch the backpack. It sparks from damage by being stampeded by the Reek. And he tries to take off just before Mace kills him, not realizing it was shorted. Originally, the sparks were not in the theatrical version, but they were added and inserted in the DVD release. One of the silliest takes on Jango's death is this.
And when young Boba Fett picks up Jango's head, I always just expected his head to just go like plop, like right out from the helmet. I mean, that's where his head is, right? He cut off his head. The head didn't roll out of the helmet. It's in the helmet.
Watch the obvious shadow of the head flying out of the helmet. A casual moviegoer might miss this detail, but a movie critic? Well, it's not as bad as this.
Now, Jedis apparently are forbidden to love, as this idea was introduced in Attack of the Clones. Jedis can never bang. They no love. That's bad. So how are they supposed to fucking procreate? Like, what does that mean? How do Jedis procreate if they can't love? They just look for people to breed with? That's so dumb. How do you create more of your kind? You just find people and teach them, I guess. You can never have children, though.
Yep.
Did he even watch these movies? Anyways, at about the time of Attack of the Clones, there is about 230 Jedi that attended this battle, and only about 30 will survive, which is a crippling defeat. According to Disney Rebels, there was around 10,000 Jedi at the height of the Republic, and since we are seeing the decline, it's most likely less. If you take younglings out of that number, you will soon see that there really isn't a ton of Jedi to spread around. So this was an especially costly battle. Even some council members died in this battle. So when Yoda arrives and saves the Jedi, it's another great and fun scene that I can't fault. Like I said, the third act really makes up for a lot of faults of the second act, but not entirely. I say this because every time I see Yoda show up with the clones, I keep wondering what the conversation with Yoda and the Kaminoans had been like. Did you guys know that this army was not authorized by the Republic or Jedi Council? Can you show us specifically who paid you and where the money transfers occurred from? This Tyrannus guy. Let me show you a hologram. Was it this guy? Is there anything strange, like weird orders programmed into these clones, that the involved parties asked you to insert that may affect the clones in any way? If we are going to lead this army, we should know, right? What makes this more frustrating is the Clone Wars animated show. This show really damages a lot of canon, both before Disney bought it and kind of continues the trend after. The bottom line is that this show proposes that the Jedi discovered Count Dooku was involved with the creation of the clones, and they just brush it off. It's really silly. I am open to reviewing the Clone Wars TV show season by season in short snippets, maybe 45 minutes per season, but the truth is, I'm not ready to go down that rabbit hole. I suppose if this channel takes off and you, the viewer, are interested in me doing that, leave comments, and in time as I grow, I will consider it. But for now, I'm focusing on just the movies. So when we get to the clone battle outside the arena, there is more footage not inserted in the film, and some of it I think should have been in the film, especially this scene depicting the Republic starships landing. Speeder bikes were also inserted into the scene, and other interesting tidbits. I really like the camera usage for the theatrical version quite well. You feel like you're in the thick of engagements, and it has a taste of realism. If anyone wants to question George Lucas's versatility of camera usage, speak up, because he is not just a reverse shot angle director as some suggest. Now, many often question whether Obi-Wan knew of Padme and Anakin's love affair, and I always thought there was no debate, especially considering later scenes in this movie and Revenge of the Sith. The first scene that gives away the relationship is Anakin's reaction to Padme dropping from the ship. He is clearly nuts for her and has a serious attachment. Yoda even senses it. Yet no one confronts this, even though it is taboo in the Jedi Order in this and the next film. A frustrating thing is when Padme gets up, she immediately tells the clone that they have to get to a hangar where Dooku is. How does she know Dooku is going to a hangar? I'm really agreeing with Plinkett a lot in this analysis.
Point is, when Padme lands on the sand, she says,
"We've got to get to that hangar."
How did you know they were going to a hangar bay? Did you read the script too?
The lightsaber fight in Attack of the Clones with Obi-Wan and Anakin was disappointing, especially when Anakin dims the lights. The superimposed head on the stunt double also has some difficult moments. Once again, the original concept of the fight was changed like most things in this movie.
At one time I was going to have them both fight him at the same time, but that didn't really seem to work as well as me doing each one individually.
I agree that changing this was necessary because it would have been just another Darth Maul-like fight. For story reasons, changing this fight needed to happen because it shows how Anakin and Obi-Wan do not work well together because of their fractured relationship. In Episode 1, even though Obi-Wan was petulant, when things got bad, Master and Apprentice could work together out of mutual respect and experience. Thus, for the purposes of Attack of the Clones fight, it fits well with the relationship. This also strengthens the next film when you see Anakin and Obi-Wan working together to show how much they've matured after 3 years of fighting in the Clone Wars as a team. I respect that narrative decision on Episode 2's part. However, this basically doomed this film's duel before Yoda arrives because it is so lackluster and is beneath what the audience expected where duels are concerned. I know a lot of folks really didn't like Yoda using a lightsaber, but how many complain that he did so again in Revenge of the Sith? Sooner or later, Yoda had to fight for his life in one of these movies, and introducing his fighting style in this film was okay for me, I guess. I wasn't excited by it, nor was I put off by it. I know Yoda thinks over fighting, but the little dude teaches kids how to use lightsabers, so he does use one. That's just the way it is. Sooner or later, it would appear in the prequels considering the situations of Order 66. It's ludicrous to think he would never pull out a lightsaber, as some fans suggest. That's the way it should have been, without taking into account that Yoda is not the same person in Empire that he was in Attack of the Clones. He clearly changes like Obi-Wan. It is a core story element of the prequels and the classic films. But we will go over this more in the next movie and the classic trilogy. Like a broken record, this fight could have been better, as Dooku was filmed with 2 lightsabers trying to fend off Yoda's furiosity. Basically, during filming, they did a variety of takes with Dooku just swinging around using a Yoda puppet as a point of reference. In the end, the fight was just okay, to a letdown in comparison to the rest of the prequel fights, but I don't hate it. There are a lot of character depths in this fight, like all lightsaber duels, such as Dooku looking back as he flees, the lack of teamwork between Anakin and Obi-Wan. The fight also establishes that Dooku was very powerful as a wielder, and that neither Obi-Wan nor Anakin had a chance against him, because Dooku dispatches them so quickly. Still, I consider this the most disappointing fight in the classic and prequel trilogy. One thing that I will note is that it was nice to see the logistics of the Force being respected in this fight, as Yoda must focus like he did on Dagobah to stop the pillar from crushing Obi-Wan and Anakin. It shows that it takes great effort in continuity to use the Force. It's great Disney kept to this reality, because it would really confuse the Force and its users if they did something different than what is shown here.
That's not how the Force works.
Wait, if Vader can stop a gigantic ship, why couldn't Yoda? It's almost like the Disney Star Wars does not acknowledge the previous classic and prequel rules. We'll have to look into that later. An interesting thing happens at the end of this fight, though, and I'm stunned folks were not up in arms about it, because it is a monumental conflict with the established narrative. Watch this scene. Padme is kissing and holding Anakin directly in front of Yoda's line of sight and right next to Obi-Wan. If anyone doubts that either of these characters do not know what's going on between the Padawan and the Senator, then they are blind. They know, and it is a serious plot issue, because directly after this scene, they send Anakin off alone with Padme to take her home, after they just saw this. The movie shows us this, and there is no debate. Plain and simple. This problem will lead into the next movie, so we'll save it for Revenge of the Sith to talk about this further. Finally, we come to the wedding, which, again, should be shell-shock to most first-time viewers. It seems so questionable, especially because of Padme's commitment to her responsibilities. At the end of the film, I was awash with frustration, excitement, nerd appeasement, and confusion. The film has a ton of things going for it, and like my coverage of The Phantom Menace, I didn't include everything, like the deleted scenes with the speeder chase where Obi-Wan removes debris from the engine of their vehicle, the clear parallels to the Dr. Zhivago love story, things hidden in the asteroid field, or the many background things in numerous battles. It also has a good repeat viewing potential, but not at the level of the previous films, because it is, at many times, hard to watch when you think about the details. So why is this? Well, Plinkett says it's because of this.
The original Star Wars movies borrowed from earlier iconic imagery in order to create the look of the movie. With clones, it's just whatever they could shove in there from varying unrelated sources, even taking things from the previous films. You see, in May of 2000, Lucas must have seen Gladiator and decided that he also wanted an arena in his movie, but his was gonna be bigger and betterer. Then I guess there was an attempt to outdo Ridley Scott even more by making a futuristic city that was much bigger and betterer than the one in Blade Runner. My computers are better than yours. The line between paying homage and ripping off starts to blur at this point, but the worst is yet to come when clones begin stealing things from Empire. These are the real flaws of the prequels, not the tiny nitpicking about things, but the major problems.
Every single frame, every single shot in the movie has a digital effect.
When you suck out the humanity from the films and replace it with the ease of digital filmmaking, well, it just sucks.
Now, to be fair, I edited Plinkett's conclusions, and there is a part that went over things that were copied from Empire Strikes Back into Attack of the Clones, as well as the actors' frustration with the blue screens and the abundance of visual effects in the prequels. Now, I will say that Plinkett's argument is not devoid of merit, and you should check it out if you enjoy the debate. However, I think the disappointment in this film is more nuanced than his conclusions. I think the first thing that affected this film was the backlash from The Phantom Menace. Lucas had this to say about it in 2005.
How worried are you that the critics are not going to like this new movie?
Oh, I'm not worried at all. They haven't liked any of them, really. And they especially haven't liked the last two. So,
well, exactly.
Hey, it can't get any worse.
Yeah, but come on. I mean, when they go after your writing, your directing, it has to hurt.
Oh, it always hurts.
It has to hurt.
It hurts a great deal. But part of making movies is you get attacked.
I can't definitely say that Lucas did not care or did care about the backlash, but he did say this 10 years after the prequel trilogy was done.
You go to make a movie and all you do is get criticized, and people try to make decisions about what you're going to do before you do it. It's not much fun, and you can't experiment. You can't do anything. You have to do it a certain way. I don't like that. I never did. I started out in experimental films, and I want to go back to experimental films. But of course, nobody wants to see experimental films.
What Lucas said right here was right on the money, because Episode 1 was different, and Lucas had something else in mind to show us for the prequels, and he got a lot of flack for it. Some might try to alter history and say the backlash for Episode 1 didn't exist till years later, but you can easily find publications denouncing the film and fans denouncing Jar Jar and mocking Lucas throughout the timeline of 2000 to 2002. Lucas went from beloved creator since 1977 to 1997 who could do no wrong to a ridiculed meme by fans who did not like the prequels or the special edition. After this period, Lucas would have to contend with songs about him like this.
That's why we say George Lucas raped our childhood. George Lucas raped our childhood. George Lucas raped our childhood.
Or shorts and speeches ridiculing him like this.
And the first thing I thought of doing, if I actually had a time machine, is I would go back to around 1993 or 94 and kill George Lucas with a shovel. That was the first thing that came to my mind. And stop him from making the prequels. That's how I would try to save history.
George Lucas fingered my late adolescence.
There are countless things to find with ease that has fun with George Lucas, and a lot of them are great. None of the stuff offends me that much, and I can separate myself enough to laugh along with them. Not even the last two clips bother me, as I'm kind of desensitized to this stuff. Yet I often sympathize with George, who does keep up with fan material, as he championed it graciously, even after the backlash. He has fan-favorite films, too, like Young George Lucas in Love. Today, people are comfortable lambasting Lucas and the prequels as if it's a trendy thing to do. Critics who made a living shunning the prequels go so far as to say judgmental things like this.
So what you're saying is George Lucas has a limited mental focus, a limited intelligence.
It's painful to look at this stuff because I love George Lucas's creation and I'm thankful to him for what he's done. However, regardless of how he feels, even if it doesn't bother him at all, the backlash still affected the production of Attack of the Clones, and this is undebatable because we know for a fact that many things in Episode 2 was altered because of the critical reception of Phantom Menace. Lucas's film style is the key to the way he makes movies. Most films are made in a straight amount of time, and then it is edited together. If something is missed, reshoots are done, and then budgets get larger. Lucas makes his films completely different. He gathers scenes like a documentarian and then brings this treasure trove to the editor and sorts out the film from there. For example, in Revenge of the Sith, before shooting even began, the schedule for the shoot was 60 days in the summer of 2003, 10 days in March 2004, and 5 days in October 2004, with a couple extra days put in for that, just in case he needed extra. The shooting days were all in the actors' contracts who were relevant to the scenes, and it was done to match Lucas's way of filming. He is a documentarian and experimental filmmaker first in his approach, and this is well known from many of his own words in interviews. Lucas is even quoted in print saying this: "I'm very used to shooting, cutting material together, going out and shooting some more, cutting it together, and creating it out of nothing. You have a vague idea of what your subject is going to be, but the actual story evolves as you deal with real people and real life. You don't quite know what you're going to get." I highly recommend that people wanting more insight into his film style to check out The Making of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith by J.W. Rinsler, as this covers the topic in detail, including the quote I just used and this quote from Rick McCullum: "We never truly know what George is doing, but it's no different than Episode 2 because we didn't know what he was doing on that one either. Usually, no one would go off and spend millions of dollars without understanding what the very foundation of the film they're making is, but we break that rule in film production." This should sound familiar to all Star Wars fans because the rough cut for the original Star Wars film was a disaster, and Lucas literally got ill over the situation. You could say Marcia Lucas, Paul Hirsch, Richard Chew, and T.M. Christopher's editing saved Star Wars, and that argument would be sound. Still, Lucas delivered all the scenes to them, and they figured it out to make it work. Without the original editors for Phantom Menace, Ben Burtt took over the task, and he made Episode 1 crisp, in my opinion, and I'm sure some might want to debate me on that. I believe this style really caught up with Lucas on Attack of the Clones, and it's noticeable as there was just too much to cover, and the pressure to deliver action set pieces seemed the priority to make the film more palatable for traditional Star Wars fans who since 1997 were vocally unhappy. This is not a poor reflection of those fans. Rather, it is a show of respect from Lucas, who seemingly cared about those fans. Then there is the next major issue.
I start in the middle. It was Episode 4 right from the beginning because I don't like beginnings. I like to cut right into the middle of the action. That's kind of what we do on Indiana Jones. It's kind of what I do on American Graffiti. It's just, I don't like to do the exposition part.
Lucas wanted to jump us into Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones without giving us all the answers like he did in Star Wars. He expects you to move along with the story regardless of the information we might be missing. If you look at A New Hope during its theatrical release, there were many questions we didn't know. What was the Clone Wars? What did it mean to be actually a Jedi? How does Luke's family survive in a barren desert, and what the heck are they farming? If Vader is such a badass, why are all the Imperial officers treating him like a peon from a bygone era? Just to name a few. You can see Lucas's film style in A New Hope just like the prequels. In Empire and Return of the Jedi, answers are forthcoming. Again, not everything was answered, but it was more generous than A New Hope. I am very comfortable saying that it worked well for Phantom Menace, and if you're wondering why I say this, go back to my coverage of that film. As for Attack of the Clones, I think it was just too much. We still had some questions from Phantom Menace, and Episode 2 was racing to the end battle, not worrying that there was far more questions forming. The problems have nothing to do with CGI. or a lazy director who sits with his coffee aloof like George is described by his detractors. If you add up all the previous issues mentioned, we can see Attack of the Clones was rushed, and there was a lot of changes in this film from the original version of what Lucas envisioned. In the original drafts, Valorum was in Attack of the Clones. Terrence Stamp didn't come back because in an Empire interview in 2013, he stated he was extremely disappointed in Lucas's directing style. He said about Lucas, "I didn't feel like he was a director of actors. He was more interested in stuff and effects. He didn't interest me, and I wouldn't think I interested him." He said he took the part to work with Natalie Portman, and when he arrived on the set, he asked where she was. To which Lucas responded, "That's Natalie," and he pointed to some paper on a wall. This was not the answer Stamp wanted to hear. He called the entire experience boring. Hugh Quarshie was supposed to return, but he wanted a script before signing as well. A well-known fact was that Lucas was really struggling writing Attack of the Clones. He finished the first draft of the script 3 months before shooting, and then hired Jonathan Hales from the Young Indiana Jones show to help him polish it up. The script was finished only 1 week before shooting, and it changed a lot during filming, so bottom line, there was no script to send to Quarshie. So, he was written out, and the nephew of Panaka, Captain Typho, was hastily created. Whatever the importance Jar Jar had for future films, including Attack of the Clones, was now in the rear-view mirror, as Ahmed Best describes.
Because of the backlash, and rightfully so, Lucasfilm backed off of Jar Jar a lot.
The droid factory scene was added at the last minute and on the fly. They made the scenes work, but Lucas had it filmed in a 3-day period, and it was never in the original script. During the dinner scene with Anakin and Padme, George Lucas was really struggling with the takes. He didn't have faith in the romantic elements of the scene or the dialogue, and asked Hayden and Padme to just improvise, and what you see in the final film, that's the result. Then there was Count Dooku. Originally, Dooku was a female. The second draft of this character was a woman with Medusa-like hair, which changed into a bald female, who later became the design for Asajj Ventress in the Clone Wars. The character was changed again to a female cyborg, before it turned into an old woman that looked worn but was extremely nimble. Finally, Lucas cast Christopher Lee and scrapped all of it. He told the art department to make the character fit Christopher Lee, and they designed these outfits until Dooku turned into what we know today. As you can see, there were things that changed at the beginning of the film, and the movie constantly evolved. There are more examples you can find if you're interested, but for the sake of this video, you get the idea. When you add up the previous 4 reasons together, the problems with Attack of the Clones start to gel. In the end, Lucas was documenting Anakin and Padme's romantic interludes, as well as the Clone Army arc. He was not narrating them, and this was the fundamental crisis of the film for most audiences. He was charging ahead to give fans what he thought they wanted, like all-out war with multiple Jedis, Yoda kicking butt, and Boba Fett, to just name a few. Out of Lucas's 6 episodes of Star Wars films, this is my least favorite. I don't hate it. There is just too many eyebrow-raising moments. I don't mean to be a stickler either, but I don't want to depend on alternative media to explain it. To go off on a tangent, I have enjoyed the Clone Wars, as I've seen every season and episode at least 3 times, but it is problematic to established canon, especially Legacy, which makes this show difficult to fully enjoy. Love it or hate it, I have always seen Attack of the Clones as an okay film that does not get better with repeat viewings. If you can look past the many muddled story elements and gaps in logic, then the movie will play just fine. For a detailed, craving moviegoer like myself, I have always struggled with it. Tell us what you think of the film in the comments below, And with that said, we have come to the end of our next video. And until then...
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
If you like what you see here, click like and subscribe, as we have a new video every month.